Jeffrey Dahmer became more and more warped, and yet he was clever enough to continue to elude police and lure young men to his apartment.
Crime scenes are places investigators enter hoping to uncover the truth, but sometimes what they find is far more disturbing than the crime itself. Not just signs of violence, but objects left behind that seem to tell a chilling story of their own. A stack of dishes placed with terrifying purpose. A tape recording waiting for victims who would never escape. Ordinary items suddenly transformed into symbols of fear. Over the years, detectives have stepped into rooms that looked completely normal at first glance, until one strange detail changed everything. In some cases, those discoveries revealed the twisted thinking of a killer. In others, they created mysteries that investigators still struggle to explain. Today, we're exploring some of the creepiest things ever found at violent crime scenes. 30. Stacked dishes. One of the most chilling tactics used by the Golden State Killer involved something as ordinary as dinner plates. After breaking into homes and tying up couples, he would place a stack of dishes on the husband's back while he lay bound on the floor. If the plates made even the slightest sound, he would kill everyone in the house. The victims were forced to lie completely still for hours, terrified that any movement could cost them their lives. When police arrived, the delicate stacks sometimes remained perfectly balanced, silent proof of the fear those victims endured. 29. The orientation tape. Some criminals leave behind evidence. Others leave behind something far more disturbing. Investigators discovered that David Parker Ray, known as the Toy Box Killer, recorded a chilling cassette tape for his victims. The tape would play after they regained consciousness in his torture chamber. In a calm, almost professional voice, Ray explained where they were and what would happen next. What made it truly terrifying wasn't just the content, it was how rehearsed and organized it sounded, like a twisted orientation for a nightmare. 28. Purple shrouds and matching sneakers. When authorities entered the mansion linked to the Heaven's Gate cult, they found a scene that felt almost unreal. Inside were 39 bodies, carefully arranged as if they were peacefully asleep. Each member wore identical black clothing and brand new black and white Nike sneakers, while purple cloths covered their bodies. What made the scene especially unsettling was the eerie order. Nothing looked chaotic. Everything appeared planned and deliberate, like a ritual. The uniform clothing and neatly placed bodies made the room feel less like a crime scene and more like a silent, haunting ceremony. 27. The clown suits. John Wayne Gacy appeared to be a respected member of his community. He volunteered, attended events, and even entertained children by dressing up as Pogo the Clown. But when investigators searched his house, they uncovered something horrifying, along with the remains of numerous victims hidden around the property. Among the evidence were the colorful clown costumes he used for his performances. Seeing those bright, cheerful outfits hanging in the same home where so many lives were taken created a disturbing contrast. The clown suits themselves weren't illegal, but knowing who wore them turned an innocent costume into something deeply unsettling. 26. The ransom note. One of the strangest pieces of evidence in a famous child murder case was a 2.5-page ransom note found inside the family's own home. What made it particularly unsettling was that it had been written on paper from the house itself. The note demanded a very specific amount of money, $118,000, and contained long, rambling instructions. The idea that someone could sit inside the house, even today, the mysterious note continues to fuel debate and theories about what really happened that night. 25. Mummified dolls. When police searched the apartment of Russian historian Anatoly Moskvin, they thought they had stumbled upon a strange collection of handmade dolls. The figures were dressed in clothes and arranged neatly around the apartment, but a closer inspection revealed something horrifying. The dolls were actually the mummified remains of young girls that Moskvin had secretly dug up from cemeteries. He had preserved the bodies and dressed them up, even celebrating birthdays for them. What initially looked like a bizarre hobby quickly turned into one of the most disturbing discoveries investigators had ever seen. 24. The kitchen scene. In one of the most grotesque crime scenes investigators have ever described, police arrived at a home expecting to investigate a missing person case. Instead, they discovered something far worse. The victim's body had been mutilated, and inside the kitchen, a pot was found cooking on the stove. When officers looked inside, they realized the victim's head had been placed there. Even more disturbing, plates had been prepared as if someone planned to serve the meal. The sheer cruelty and planning behind the act left experienced investigators shaken. turning an already horrific crime into something almost unimaginable. 23. Blocked drains. Sometimes the smallest household problem can reveal something horrifying. Residents of an apartment building once complained about a drain that kept clogging and overflowing. When plumbers finally opened the pipes, they discovered something far worse than a normal blockage: pieces of human flesh and small bones. The shocking find led police to the apartment of serial killer Dennis Nilsen. For months, he had been flushing the remains of his victims down the toilet. What seemed like an ordinary plumbing issue ended up exposing a terrifying secret hidden inside the building. 22. The M Ladies tapes. Inside a remote cabin connected to killers Leonard Lake and Charles Ng, investigators discovered several videotapes labeled M Ladies. At first, the label didn't seem unusual, but when the tapes were played, the truth was horrifying. The recordings showed the two men tormenting their victims, capturing moments of fear and cruelty on camera. Unlike most crime scenes where evidence only hints at what happened, these tapes revealed the horrors directly. They became some of the most disturbing pieces of evidence ever recovered. 21. The wall of photos. When police searched the home of the serial killer known as the Grim Sleeper, they uncovered a massive collection of photographs hidden in his garage. There were over 1,000 images and videos showing women in vulnerable or unconscious states. Investigators were shocked by the sheer number of photos. It suggested decades of crimes that had gone unnoticed. In an attempt to identify potential victims, authorities even released many of the photos to the public. What looked like a messy storage space turned out to be something far darker. The 20. Nylon stockings. During the investigation into the infamous Boston Strangler, detectives kept finding the same disturbing clue: nylon stockings left at several crime scenes. The killer often used them to strangle his victims, turning an ordinary item into a deadly weapon. In one especially eerie case, the stockings were tied into an elaborate bow around the victim's neck, almost like a twisted decoration. That detail made investigators realize the crimes followed a pattern. The stockings became the killer's chilling signature, helping police link multiple murders that had terrified Boston. 19. The video diaries. Obsession can sometimes turn into something extremely dangerous. In the case of Ricardo Lopez, investigators discovered a disturbing collection of video diaries inside his apartment. He had recorded more than 20 hours of footage documenting his growing obsession with a famous singer. Speaking directly to the camera, Lopez shared his thoughts, emotions, and eventually his violent plans. The recordings ended with a horrifying act captured on camera. For investigators, watching the tapes felt like witnessing someone's mind unravel in real time. 18. The handwritten warning. Months before a tragic crime took place at Camp Scott, a strange note appeared inside one of the tents. It read, "We are on a mission to kill 3 girls." At the time, the message was dismissed as a prank, something meant to scare campers. Unfortunately, the warning would later prove to be chillingly real. When investigators returned to examine the note after the murders occurred, it became one of the most haunting pieces of evidence in the case. The idea that the threat had been written in advance and ignored turned that small piece of paper into a deeply disturbing reminder. 17. The Son of Sam letter. During the terror caused by the Son of Sam killings in New York, police discovered a handwritten letter left by the killer himself. The note was addressed directly to investigators and the public, filled with taunts, strange statements, and erratic spelling. In it, the writer proudly identified himself as the Son of Sam, a name that quickly spread across headlines. What made the letter especially disturbing was its chaotic tone. It sounded like a message from someone completely detached from reality. The note transformed the case from a series of attacks into a terrifying psychological game between the killer and the authorities. 16. The Hello Kitty doll. One of the most disturbing crime scene discoveries involved something that should have been completely innocent. After a nightclub worker was kidnapped and killed, investigators were led to an apartment where they found the doll hiding a horrifying secret. Inside it were human remains connected to the crime. The contrast between the cheerful toy and the grim reality inside made the discovery especially shocking. It was the kind of detail that felt almost impossible to comprehend. What should have been a harmless children's item had become a container for something deeply disturbing. 15. BTK's Polaroids. The serial killer known as BTK kept disturbing souvenirs from his crimes. When authorities finally arrested him, they discovered hidden photographs taken with a Polaroid camera. Some of the images showed victims, while others showed the killer recreating scenes using dolls and staged positions. These photographs revealed just how much he relived his crimes long after they happened. For investigators, the photos weren't just evidence. They were a disturbing window into the mind of someone who treated violence like a twisted project. 14. Footprints in the snow. Before a brutal family murder occurred at a remote farm, the homeowner noticed something strange: a set of footprints in the snow leading from the forest to the house. What made the discovery even more unsettling was that there were no footprints leading away. At the time, it was simply an odd observation, but after the murders were discovered, investigators realized the footprints might have belonged to the killer who had been lurking nearby. The chilling possibility is that someone may have been hiding on the property for days before the crime took place. 13. Pentagrams on the walls. During the reign of terror caused by the Night Stalker, investigators began noticing disturbing symbols left behind at some crime scenes. On several occasions, pentagrams were drawn on the walls using lipstick taken from the victims' homes. These symbols were meant to send a message and frighten the public even more. The strange markings made the crimes feel ritualistic and unpredictable. For people following the case, the pentagrams became a terrifying symbol associated with the killer's attacks, making the already frightening crimes seem even darker. 12. Messages written in blood. Some of the most chilling evidence found at crime scenes connected to the Manson family were the messages written in blood on the walls. Words like pig and other phrases were deliberately scrawled across surfaces after the murders. The messages were meant to confuse investigators and send a disturbing signal to the public. Seeing those words written in such a horrifying way turned the crime scenes into something almost surreal. Instead of just violence, it looked like a twisted attempt to create a message that would echo far beyond the house where the crime happened. 11. The drum of acid. Inside the apartment of serial killer Jeffrey Dahmer, investigators found something that immediately caught their attention: a large metal drum filled with acid. When examined more closely, the container held human remains. The drum revealed the horrifying methods Dahmer used to hide evidence of his crimes. But what made the discovery even more disturbing was how ordinary the container looked. Sitting quietly in the corner of the room, it was just another object in the apartment. Until investigators realized what was inside, the discovery became one of the most shocking pieces of evidence in the entire case. 10. The bathroom hair. Sometimes criminals try to outsmart investigators in strange ways. In the case of the Unabomber, Ted Kaczynski, authorities discovered that he had planted someone else's hair inside one of his explosive packages. The hair had been collected from a public bathroom, likely taken from a sink or the floor. The purpose was simple: mislead investigators and send them chasing the wrong suspect. While the trick itself might seem small, it showed how calculated the bomber was. He was thinking several steps ahead, trying to manipulate forensic evidence before authorities even began their investigation. 9. The message on the machete. In one brutal murder case, investigators found the weapon still lying at the crime scene, a machete. But what made the discovery even more disturbing was the writing carved or marked onto the blade itself. On one side of the weapon was a chilling message aimed at the victim, implying punishment for betrayal. On the other side was another threatening note directed toward a second potential victim. The killer hadn't just committed the crime, he had turned the weapon into a message. Seeing those words on the blade made the evidence feel less like a tool and more like a declaration of intent. 8. The Death Tarot Card. During the terrifying Washington, D.C. sniper attacks, investigators found something extremely strange at one of the shooting scenes: a tarot card. Specifically, it was the death card, left deliberately as a message. Written on the card were chilling words directed at the police, including a demand that they not release the information publicly. The card seemed like a calculated attempt to intimidate authorities and create even more fear. For investigators, the discovery confirmed that the attackers weren't just committing random violence. They were deliberately trying to communicate and manipulate the situation. 7. The plea, written on the wall. In one of the most disturbing murder cases in Chicago, investigators found a message written directly on the wall of the victim's apartment. The words read, "For heaven's sake." The statement sounded like a desperate confession mixed with a warning. It suggested the killer felt both guilt and a loss of control over their own actions. Whether it was meant as a genuine plea or a twisted attempt to confuse investigators remains debated, but seeing those words written at the crime scene created a haunting moment for everyone involved. 6. The Lego clues. When investigators reopened a decades-old murder case, one detail stood out: Lego pieces scattered around the crime scene. At first, they seemed like random toys left behind. But years later, advances in forensic technology revealed something shocking. Fingerprints on the Lego bricks belonged to a child who had been present during the crime. Authorities eventually realized the suspect had brought his young son with him. The chilling thought investigators couldn't ignore was this: a child quietly playing with toys while a horrific crime unfolded nearby. 5. The word dead. In a disturbing case that spread across the internet, a killer documented parts of his crime online before being caught. Inside the house, investigators found several strange messages written around the scene. The most chilling was written across the victim's driver's license. A single word, dead. The message showed an unsettling lack of remorse and almost felt like a twisted label placed on the victim. Combined with the online posts, the crime revealed how some offenders seek attention even after committing horrifying acts. 4. I will return. In one disturbing case, investigators discovered taunting notes left behind after a murder. One message carried a chilling line: "I murder so that I may come back." The note seemed designed to mock authorities while hinting that the killer might strike again. Messages like this make crimes even more unsettling because they turn the investigation into a psychological game. Instead of simply committing the act and disappearing, the killer deliberately tried to provoke fear and curiosity, leaving investigators and the public wondering what might happen next. 3. The torture board. While investigating the crimes of serial killer Dean Corll, police uncovered a horrifying device hidden inside the house: a wooden board fitted with restraints. Victims had reportedly been tied to the board before being tortured. The discovery revealed that the crimes weren't random acts of violence, but part of a calculated and horrifying system. Seeing the device made the reality of the victim's suffering painfully clear for investigators. It stood as chilling physical evidence of how methodically the killer carried out his brutal crimes. 2. The unsolved ciphers. When a man's body was discovered in a rural field, investigators found 2 mysterious pieces of paper in his pockets. Both were filled with strange coded messages made up of letters, numbers, and symbols. Despite years of analysis by experts and cryptographers, the codes have never been fully solved. Authorities believe the messages may contain clues about the victim's final movements or even the killer's identity. The unsettling possibility is that the answer to the entire mystery might still be hidden within those undeciphered codes. Number 1. The House of Horrors. When investigators entered the home of Ed Gein, they found something far beyond a typical crime scene. Inside the house were disturbing objects made from human remains, items that looked like ordinary furniture but carried a horrifying truth. The entire home felt like a twisted museum filled with macabre creations. Some crime scene discoveries are terrifying not just because of the crimes, but because of the eerie objects left behind. Ordinary items suddenly become chilling evidence once their stories are revealed. So, which one of these discoveries disturbed you the most? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoy exploring dark and mysterious true crime stories, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next one.